In this video, we're going to install Kiro, open a project folder, and get to what we'll call the It Knows Me moment. That is the first time you open a fresh AI chat, and the assistant already knows your name, your role, and what you're working on. I'll start by creating a folder on my desktop. Let's call it My Project. When I start Kiro, it'll ask me to point to a directory to define the first project, and this folder is what I'll point to. I'll give Kiro permission to create, run, and delete files within that My Project folder. Next, let's open Microsoft Edge and navigate to kiro.dev/downloads. I'll click on Download for Windows and open the file to install. The installation process is quite straightforward. Just walk through the prompts and install. With the installation complete, I'll launch Kiro and it'll ask me to sign in. For most people, the easiest way to sign in is simply to use your Google account. However, I've got an IAM Identity Center set up, so I'm going to click Your Organization and enter my credentials. I'll walk through the initial prompts to complete my initial preferences and click Done. Kiro then asks me which project folder to open, and I'll steer to the desktop and click on the My Project folder we created at the beginning of this video. Note the pop-up that asks if I trust the authors of all files in the parent folder desktop. I'm not going to click that. However, I do trust the authors in the folder itself, that is the My Project folder, so I'll click Yes for that. That will give Kiro permission to act within this directory, that is create, edit, delete, and run files, and more. We'll set additional permissions along the way, but this will get us started. A quick orientation on what Agentic means in practice. The AI in the chat panel can read your files, create files, edit files, run commands in your terminal, install software, and call external services if you give it permission. You are in control. The AI proposes and you approve. I suggest starting with tight permissions and then loosening those permissions as you build trust. One of the most important concepts we'll cover in the entire video series is the steering file. A steering file is a plain text document that the AI can read automatically at the start of every conversation. Without one, every chat starts from zero. The AI doesn't know who you are or what you're working on. With a steering file, the AI knows. Let's create one. In the chat, I'll type, I'm setting up an agentic workspace. I want you to know a bit about who I am, the work I do, my environment, and how I want you to work. Ask me questions to fill out a profile. Keep it short for now. We can add detail later. I'll click Send. Let's see what the AI comes up with. So we have 5 questions. Let's just start with number 1. What's your primary language stack? I'm not a developer. I'm a business analyst. At this point, you might be concerned, oh no, is this going to be geared towards software developers? Historically, an IDE, that is an integrated development environment like Kiro, is software developer centric. However, with the advent of AI, IDEs become open to all kinds of knowledge workers. So we'll be able to proceed just fine without having a development background. Therefore, for number 2, what kind of work do you mostly do? I build reports and ETL workflows. Number 3, what's your build test lint setup? I'll just type, I don't know. Number 4, any strong preferences on code style? None. And number 5, how do you want me to behave by default? Move fast and make changes, or check in with you before acting? I'll type, I want you to be a teacher. Tell me what's going on before acting. We can change that later if we want to change the AI's behavior. I'll submit. So notice the AI comes back, tells me that's a helpful profile, and then it starts building things. And I can see in the upper left-hand corner that things are happening. Now I have this .kiro directory, and if I click and expand this, I can see that there is a folder. Well, underneath the folder, there's a file called profile.md. If I open the My Project folder on the desktop, I'll see within File Explorer, there's .kiro, and also there's a steering folder, and in the steering folder is profile.md. Within Kiro, if I click on Profile MD, notice that I have the information that I provided in the AI's particular style. It tells me who I am, technical environment, how to work together, Notice also at the top we have inclusion always, and this is going to be important because this means that the AI will always take up a little bit of its context window with this profile document. It'll always know who I am. Let's read through this now. Your profile is now active. Every time we talk, I'll see that steering file and remember the things that we told it to remember about myself. And it has a couple of additional questions. What data tools do you use today, and where does your data live? Well, in this course, we are AWS-centric. If you're coming from a different background and you're using Microsoft or you're using Google or perhaps some other platform, well, a lot of the things that we're going to go through in this class will still be relevant to you, but we are AWS-centric. So let me just tell the AI that. I'm AWS-centric. I'll use Excel, CSV locally, and S3, Athena, and Redshift on AWS. Those are things that we'll be going through later in the course. Where does my data live? My data lives locally in S3 and in Redshift. If you're going through this on your own and your data lives in other places, you could set up those other places. Though in this course, I will walk you through how to set up an AWS account and how to get these tools set up within your AWS account. I'll hit send. The AI responds with a synopsis. Looks good. One thing to tell you about regarding these files, like this profile.md, if I right-click on the tab, there's an option that says Open Preview. In the preview, I get a nice human-readable format. These MD files are referred to as Markdown files. They're just text files, but they also include some formatting that makes it nice and easy for humans to read. Since they are just text files, that also makes it nice and easy for AI to read. Let's take a moment to get oriented to the interface. On the far left-hand side of the screen, there's a navigational strip, and this navigation strip has several icons on it that will allow me to access various parts of Kiro. The part that I'm interested in is Explorer. So you can see Explorer will show us the directories and files that are located within my project. Next, taking up most of the screen is the editor, where I can look at various tabs to see various content in my project. We can't see it now, but at the bottom portion of the screen, a terminal will display, which is a command line interface to my computer. In fact, let's go ahead and turn that on via View, Terminal. The right-hand side of the screen is where the magic happens. This is called the chat panel. I can click on the chat icon located at the very top right-hand portion of the interface to toggle that panel on and off. Or I can use the keyboard shortcut Control-Alt-B on Windows or Command-Alt-B on Mac. Note at the bottom of this chat, there's an option for choosing different models. For our purposes, I'm sticking with the auto model for now. I'll enter another chat. Now let's create something for the project itself. I'm using this workspace to get comfortable with Kiro and eventually build small tools that help me at work. Ask me a few questions and set up whatever you think makes sense. Keep it short. So that's a pretty vague prompt there, but let's see what the AI does with this and how it initially constructs my environments. I'll click on Send. Whatever the initial construction is, note that we can always make changes in the future. So it's going to ask me, do you have Python installed already? That's a great question. I do not have Python installed. But in our next video, we will be installing Python. So I'll say, not yet, but soon. Number 2, the agent asked me, what kind of small tools are you imagining? For example, scripts that clean up CSVs before uploading to S3. That sounds pretty good. In fact, we do have an exercise coming up where we're going to do exactly that. SQL queries you want to save and reuse for Athena and Redshift. No, not really, but I will need to have SQL queries. I don't necessarily want to save them and reuse them, but we will be using SQL. Reports that pull data and summarize it. Yes, we are going to be creating reports that pull data and summarize it, and something else. I'll answer for number 2, yes to cleaning up files. I'll tell it that I want to use SQL queries, but I'll not need to save them. Yes, I will create reports. And let's add one. I'll need to transform data, because one of the things that we're going to walk through is pivoting, joining, unioning, and doing other data cleansing and transformation activities. Let's click on Send and see what happens. The AI comes back and it tells me it's going to set up some structure. There's a folder structure. In fact, you can see that folder structure being set up. It also tells me that there's going to be a project steering file so that it can remember what this workspace is for and how to help me. Here's a README. It says it's going to hold off on the Python setup. I'll scroll down. Notice that it's asking me, does this sound good? And then it goes ahead and creates it all. Sometimes the AI does that, so be ready for the AI to be proactive. Often that's quite helpful. Sometimes you might want to tell it to back off of things that you've done. We've got several errors that's happened here. That's interesting. And then finally it comes back and it says, okay, it's done some work. As we go through the course, we'll talk about how to teach the AI not to stumble over the same lip in the sidewalk every time it walks a certain direction. That'll be a part of the learning process for the AI. Let's take a look at what the AI created. There's the project MD as well as the profile MD. Notice that the inclusion for both is set to always. You may have gotten different results. For example, you may have inclusion set to manual or to auto. I would suggest that for these files, inclusion should be set to always. We have a relatively large context window to work with, so we don't have to be too worried about taking up too much of our context window with this text information. If you want to know about the context window, you can hover over the very bottom portion of the chat panel and see the breakdown of the context window and what's being taken up. So notice that steering files has rounded to 0%. So very, very little space has been taken up by our steering files. There are definitely cases when you'll want to choose other inclusions. If you don't have any inclusion listed at the top of your steering files, by default, they will always be included. So don't worry about adding anything if there's nothing at the top. However, if inclusion is set to something other than always, I would encourage you to go ahead and change that to always. I'll see that there's a data directory with input and output. You'll notice that there's some get statements here. We're not going to worry about those right now. These are just empty placeholders for now. Under notebooks, same thing. Under scripts, also same thing. I do, however, have a README file. Now, the README file doesn't have anything about inclusion at the top. This is because it is not in the steering directory. Let me right-click on readme.md and select Open Preview. This is really for me. This is not for the AI. This is for me or some other person to review in the future to understand what this project is all about. Again, likely your setup is going to be a bit different, but conceptually it should be the same. In a relatively short period of time, we've seen some pretty cool things. We've seen that the AI is actually able to do some work on our behalf. It's actually writing files to our directory. As we move on into future exercises, we're going to see that the AI is actually able to generate much more sophisticated work as well.